Conservatives stand in favor of a free trade agreement with India and deeper ties with other countries. But diversification must be grounded in realism. Not all partners are interchangeable. The Prime Minister proclaimed in the Davos speech that he wanted a new middle power alliance. Actually, there's nothing new about it at all. We already have that. We've had it for years. In fact, Canada already has free trade with over 50 other countries, and most of them are middle powers. We should look to deepen those relationships, but their markets are already open to us. But the problem, here's the problem, and here's the irony. The problem is not that these countries block our products from coming in, it's that our own government blocks our products from getting out. And that is the major trade barrier. Signing meaningless communiques or more stagecraft masquerading as statecraft won't fix that reality. In fact, some of the worst tariffs imposed on Canada today are those imposed by the government here. Slow permits, changing rules, high taxes, outright bans on shipping oil off our northwest BC coast. We have the second slowest building permits anywhere in the OECD. It now takes 19 years to get a mine approved. None of that has changed in the last year.
There you have it, guys. Whatever you think about Pierre Poilievre, everything he said is it's 100% true right there. Today is Friday, February 27th. My name is Miloš Krajčnik. This is Canuck News. Have a great article today. It really covers a lot of what we've been talking about, to be honest. But this is specifically around the USMCA. Jameson Greer, he's given his thoughts on what the USMCA trade negotiations are probably going to look like in the next couple of months. But he's saying very explicitly in the article that the US is telling Canada what it wants from these negotiations, guys. It comes down to higher tariffs on Canadian goods, access to Canadian dairy markets, stricter content rules for cars, and no backdoor Chinese goods through Canada. That is key, guys. And the U.S. Trade Representative Greer, he actually laid it out. He said, if Canada wants to agree that we can have some level of higher tariff on them while they open their markets to us on things like dairy and other things, then that's a helpful conversation. What he's essentially saying is pay more, give up more, and accept more control. Doug Ford is saying, we need to fight back. Mark Carney is saying we need to negotiate. Our finance minister, François-Philippe Champagne, is saying that Canada is paying the lowest price. But here's the problem with all three of these situations. Ford's counter tariffs won't work. The math isn't there. Carney's negotiation is essentially a surrender, and Champagne is bragging about getting exploited. And let's go through the article, guys. I think you guys are gonna like what it says. The United States Trade Representative says a potential deal with Canada must include higher tariffs and increased access for Americans as officials from both countries plan to meet in the coming weeks in advance of a high-stakes review of the North American Free Trade Pact. Jameson Greer, the U.S. Trade Representative, told U.S. television networks that U.S. and Canadian trade officials spoke on Wednesday and that the Trump administration was open to Canada's ideas on how to reach an agreement. But he also told CBC News in an interview after U.S. President Donald Trump's State of the Union address Tuesday, that Canada, like other countries, must also accept protective tariffs in a bid to reshore American industries. If Canada wants to agree that we can have some level of higher tariff on them while they open up their markets to us on things like dairy and other things, then that's a helpful conversation, Mr. Greer told CBC. The meetings in Washington are happening as Canada prepares for review of the USMCA amid reports that Mr. Trump may be looking to exit the deal or pursue bilateral agreements. Negotiations over the future of the USMCA are already underway. The three countries are working toward a July 1st deadline, at which point they have to decide whether to renew it for another 16 years or enter into annual reviews. They can also withdraw the agreement within 6 months. Canada has been hit by punishing duties on industries such as steel, aluminum, and cars, but most goods remain tariff-free because of the USMCA. A small portion of products that aren't covered by the USMCA are being hit with a new 10% duty, down from the 35% because of last week's Supreme Court decision that struck down a key tool used by Mr. Trump to impose tariffs. Prime Minister Mark Carney, who said Wednesday he hadn't watched Mr. Trump's speech, has scaled back the vast majority of Canada's Trudeau-era counter tariffs on the U.S. in a bid to revive trade talks. Mr. Greer's comments drew the ire of Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who floated the idea on Wednesday that if the U.S. insists on higher tariffs, Canada should do the same. I can tell you one thing, a tariff on Canada is a tax on Americans. They know it. They're feeling the crunch down there, Mr. Ford told reporters at a hospital announcement in Niagara Falls. I'm going to stop right here, guys. I think we have a lot to kind of break down here. The U.S. Trade Representative, Jamieson Greer, literally told Canada that what the U.S. wants. If Canada wants to agree that we can have some level of higher tariff on them while they open their markets to us on things like dairy and other things, then that's a helpful conversation. What he's saying is pay higher tariffs, give up dairy access, accept stricter content rules. Guys, this isn't a negotiation. This is a protection racket. And the USMCA deadline is July 1st. So six months from now, the US can walk away from the deal entirely or demand even more. We don't really know what's going to happen. But what's Carney's response to all of this? Let's scale back Canada's counter tariffs to revive these trade talks. What's Ford's response? They want to tariff us, so we need to tariff them back. Nickel, potash, aluminum, road salt. A tariff on Canada is a tax on Americans. Ronald Reagan is spinning in his grave. One premier wants to fight, one prime minister wants to negotiate, but do either approaches actually work, guys? That's the real question. Let's keep it moving, guys. In Ottawa, Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne told reporters because of the USMCA, Canada is in a better position compared with other countries. But he acknowledged tariffs are a reality. I think it is pretty well understood now in the world that the view of the American administration is that there will be a price to access the American market, he said. Every country of the world that I know is paying a price. What I'm saying is that Canada is paying the lowest price. So, I mean, this in itself needs to kind of be unpacked, guys, because there's a lot going on here. Finance minister just said every country is paying a price, but we're paying the lowest price. So that's not a win, guys. He's surrendering with a smile. And what would Ford's counter tariffs actually do? Would they actually work? Let's look at the numbers though, guys. Canada exports $547 billion to the US. That's 76% of all Canadian exports go to the US. The US exports $350 billion of goods to Canada. That's 6% of all U.S. exports go to Canada. The asymmetry is just a catastrophe, guys. So what happens when Canada retaliates? We already know because it happened in March of 2025 when Blackface Justin imposed a $30 billion embargo on counter tariffs. Trump threatened to double steel and aluminum tariffs to 50%, guys. Canada backed down immediately. Why? Because we have to. What is Canada going to do? What happened in October of 2025? Stellantis, they got out of Brampton, Ontario. They went back south. $13 billion just up and left. Went back to the US. That's what tariffs actually do to Canada, guys. Companies don't stay and fight. That's not what they do. They move south unless they're a Canadian company. That is key. Ford's leverage points don't really work either, though, because Canada, when it comes to nickel, Canada supplies 50% of US nickel needs. When it comes to potash, that's 85%. And aluminum is around $13 billion in aluminum. But the U.S. can find these goods in other places. For nickel, they can go to Indonesia, but all of the mines are Chinese. But what's going to happen in Canada is Canada's going to lose its only market for nickel. For potash, they can get it from Russia. Russia's a major potash producer as well. The prices might be a little higher for the U.S., but if the U.S. actually wanted to do it, it would do it, and it would screw Canada completely. When it comes to aluminum, 101 places you can get aluminum. You can get it from the Russians. The Russians make great aluminum. The Chinese make aluminum. Pretty sure the U.S. itself makes aluminum as well. There are trade avenues for the U.S. to go down to supplant Canadian supply. That's the problem. Canada's going to lose market share permanently if it does this. The math doesn't work when you're the smaller economy. It just simply doesn't, guys. Ford says fight back. Canada tried that in March. Companies started moving production to the U.S., guys. Canada caved. Counter tariffs are a fantasy when 76% of your exports go to one country, guys. And that country just so happens to be the world hegemon. In his interview with CBC, Mr. Greer said Canada has expressed an interest in having some kind of alternative deal on trade, but added the US is focused on reshoring supply chains related to automotive, steel, and aluminum. He also expressed concerns about the USMCA in its current form, saying that it doesn't present enough opportunity for American businesses. If we want to have that deal, you need to have better rules, stricter rules, to make sure that there's more US content in what we have. He added that the US doesn't want countries such as Vietnam and China to be able to export items through Canada into the US duty-free. We know that Canada has talked about having closer ties, economic ties with China. I don't want a situation where Canada is being used as a backdoor for Chinese goods. This is key, guys. They are literally telling explicitly what their expectations are with the USMCA and what they do not want, guys. The US is demanding more concessions because Carney cut a trade deal with China in January. They don't want China in North America. Carney is the first Canadian prime minister since 2017 to go to China and cut a deal. Why was it since 2017? We need a little refresher, apparently, because in 2017, Blackface Justin caved to Donald Trump again when we arrested the Huawei CFO because Canada was about to install 5G towers across the country. We're about to use Chinese internet technology, essentially spyware, and give them access to everything Canadians are doing over the internet. This is a national security threat. It's an infrastructure national security threat, guys. Not only to Canada, but also to the US, because any trade flows that go between Canadian internet service providers and the US ones, there is a certain amount of information that goes cross border, especially when you're trading 500 over almost $600 billion from Canada to the US. But if you add them together, it's over $1 trillion in trade annually. It's crazy. And the Chinese through the internet would be able to have access to all of that. That's why that happened. That's why the US doesn't want China in North America. But Canada's going to what? We're going to start importing 49,000 EVs at a 6.1% tariff instead of a 100% tariff. Right, guys. This is exactly what we're talking about. In return for importing all those cars to what? China's going to cut tariffs on canola and pork? Really? We're going to import high-tech goods for food? Come on, guys. That's the best we can do. Canada tried to hedge its bets. We tried to reduce our dependence on the US by doing business with China. And now the US is punishing Canada for the exact thing it tried to do. Because here's the real problem. The US isn't at fault. It's Canada's fault because we chose 76% dependence, guys. We had the 1988 free trade deal. Then we had 94 NAFTA deal. And then we did systematic 40 years of economic integration with the US market. Canadian companies chose the US market because it was easy, it was profitable, and it was convenient. But Canadian companies aren't at fault. Nobody forced Canada to export south. But the government kind of did. Why? Because we didn't create the mechanisms for our companies to look outward. But let's do a little economic comparison real quick, because this isn't defensible. France has a GDP of $3 trillion. Canada's is $2.1 trillion. It's barely larger. But France has Airbus. They have the Dassault fighter jets. They have Rafale fighter jets. They have Ariane space rockets. They have their own military industrial complex. They make their own tanks. They make their own rockets. They make their own ammunitions. They have Louis Vuitton. They have luxury good items. They have L'Oreal. They have a very robust economy. They also have 3 car makes. They have Renault, they have Citroën, they have Peugeot. They have 3 independent car makes. They have Total Energy. They have their own nuclear power program. Canada has resource extraction, banking, and real estate. We have a nuclear program as well. This is all we have. We don't produce anything of our own value add. But it gets even worse because when you compare Canada to Russia, who has all of the same natural resources as Canada, Russia's really our best comparative economy and nation. They have the oil, they have gas, they have nickel, they have potash, they have uranium. What has Russia built? An independent military industrial complex that rivals the US. They have a space program that rivals the US. They have aircraft manufacturing, Sukhoi, MiG. They have their own carriers. They also have their own commercial or civil aircraft program as well. They have a nuclear industry. They have shipbuilding as well, but they've also started manufacturing their own microchips. So they're actually even going into those waters as well. It's all funded from energy revenues. It is all funded from energy. Canada took energy revenues and we started importing American goods, guys. Canada's never invested in processing its own natural resources. We export the raw nickel and then we import refined nickel. We export raw lumber and then we import finished wood products. We export oil and then we import refined gasoline or motor oil. We've never subsidized our entrepreneurs or specific industries meaningfully. We've never built value-added manufacturing, and we've just created tax conditions that don't encourage entrepreneurship. Instead, what have we done? Canada has some of the highest taxes in the world. We've literally systematically killed entrepreneurship. We chose resource extraction over manufacturing. We've chose banking and real estate over innovation. Canada's geography literally means that we'll always be facing that U.S. market gravity. We can't avoid the U.S. That's the reality. But that doesn't mean that Canada couldn't have built Bombardier into Airbus, into this massive global conglomerate, or turned oil revenues into a sovereign wealth fund like Norway or the UAE, who were asking for investments to build our own goddamn pipeline to the west, or processed lithium and nickel here instead of exporting those raw materials to China. Canada chose not to for 40 years, guys. And when the US demands higher tariffs and dairy access, Canada has no leverage to say no. It's not because the US is unreliable, it's because Canada chose integration without ever building the industries that could have given it actual options. That's the problem. And why this all matters to Canadians. The US is demanding that Canada pay these higher tariffs, guys, and give up our dairy access. Explicitly because Carney cut a trade deal with China in January. The US trade rep literally said, I don't want Canada being used as a backdoor for Chinese goods. Doug Ford says tariff them back, nickel, potash, aluminum, but the math doesn't work. We went through it, guys. Quite literally, blackface Justin tried it in March of last year. And Trump threatened to double steel tariffs. And what happened is Stellantis pulled out of Brampton, Ontario. We've lost thousands of jobs because of it. And you can't win a trade war simply when you're the smaller economy, guys. Geography literally means that Canada will always gravitate to the US market. It's natural. We don't need to fight it per se. That's unavoidable. But Canada has never actually invested in processing its own natural resources, never subsidized our entrepreneurs, and never built value-added manufacturing, guys. France is literally barely larger than Canada economically and demographically, but it has Airbus. It has an independent military-industrial complex. It has luxury goods. It has nuclear power. It has its own cars. It has its own cars. Russia has the same resources, and it's built a military-industrial complex, a space program. Like what more do you need? What more do you need? It's building, and it's actively building its own microchip industry. I mean, it's nowhere to the degree of China or the US. It's like, don't get me wrong, but it's building its own microchips, advanced microchips. What has Canada done? We've taken energy revenues and we've bought US imports, guys. And now the US is demanding tribute, and Canada has no leverage to say no. Guys, the USMCA review is July 1st. Canada's going to cave, and not because we have to. It's because we chose 40 years of integration without ever building alternatives. This is all I have for you guys today. Hope you guys liked today's episode. Please like, share, and subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Stay informed, stay curious, and God bless Canada.
This is Canada. Maple syrup and like Captain Say. Kick your ass all hockey season,